Somewhere in Starfleet's classified files, there's a question nobody has been cleared to ask out loud. What if the most dangerous species in the galaxy was never the real threat? What if it was somebody's tool? Every version of this story treats the Borg as an accident of history, a cybernetic horror the Federation was unlucky enough to stumble into. That's the official record, and it's incomplete. The Federation didn't stumble into the Borg. It was steered into them, deliberately, by a being who already knew exactly what they were, exactly what they'd done, and exactly what would happen next. Q didn't create the Borg. He did something colder. He found the perfect weapon already loose in the galaxy, aimed it at a civilization he needed silenced, and when that weapon outgrew him, he spent the next 30 years pointing an unsuspecting species at it to do his containment for him. That species was humanity. Wolf 359, The Road to the Dominion War. A lone Federation starship gutting a transwarp hub 70,000 light-years from home. None of it was an accident. All of it was cleanup. This is the case for how a god's containment problem became a Federation legend, and why the Federation still doesn't know it was hired. Before we get to why, look at when. 2365. Q hurls the Enterprise 7,000 light-years off course and drops it in front of a Borg cube the Federation has never heard of. 2367. Wolf 359, 39 ships gone in minutes. The bill for that first contact finally coming due. A decade later, on the far side of the galaxy, a stranded Voyager crew gets a course correction from an old, unwelcome guest. A gift, Q calls it, incomplete on purpose. Within a year of cashing it, that crew is standing at the doorstep of one of the collective's transwarp hubs, and they burn it down. Different decades, different captains, different ships, same signature. Q doesn't do the heavy lifting himself. He never has. He nudges, he places, he withholds just enough that someone else has to finish it. Janeway asked him outright why he didn't simply send Voyager home if he could shorten the trip at all. His answer was almost a confession. He wasn't going to do the work for them. Generosity doesn't talk like that. That's a supervisor's voice. 3 separate encounters, 3 separate Starfleet crews, 1 continuum, and every single time, the outcome is identical. Starfleet ends up doing violence to the Borg on Q's timetable, using Q's information, without Q's fingerprints anywhere on it. Curiosity doesn't produce results that consistent. Targeting does. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, you already know I'm a sucker for what-if scenarios. And that's exactly what Star Trek Voyager, Across the Unknown, is built around. You take command of the USS Voyager, stranded in the Delta Quadrant, where every decision, from crew management to how far you lean into Borg technology, shapes your journey home. It's a story-driven survival strategy game with rogue-like elements where every run is shaped by the choices you make. Fortunately, the game lets you decide exactly what kind of captain you want to be. You can stay close to canon, or you can start asking what would happen if Janeway made very different decisions. What I also like is the developers aren't done with the Delta Quadrant yet. The expansion pass has just launched, and instead of being a single DLC, it's 4 premium expansions rolling out throughout the rest of the year. Each one adds new story missions, new characters, new ships, new technologies, and new ways to experience Voyager's journey. So if you've already played Across the Unknown, this isn't just new content today. It's a game that's continuing to grow over the coming months, giving you new reasons to come back as each expansion releases. And if you're planning on picking up all 4 DLC anyway, grabbing the expansion pass is also the better value than buying them individually as they come out. The first expansion, Delta Chronicles, is available right now. It adds 5 new missions inspired by classic Voyager episodes. We're talking about Distant Origin, the Omega Directive, Coldfire, Homestead, and Inside Man. Except this time, you're the one making the decisions. Instead of replaying the episodes exactly as they happened, you get to explore entirely different outcomes based on the choices you make. You'll also recruit Reginald Barclay's hologram and Professor Forav Gigan of the Voth as new heroes, encounter 4 new NPC ships throughout the Delta Quadrant, including the massive Voth city ship, and even recruit a Ferengi Marauder as an ally. Honestly, I'm curious to see how well my Adama strategy works during the Omega Directive. Somehow I don't think Tuvok and I would agree on proper command philosophy. Star Trek Voyager, Across the Unknown, The Expansion Pass, and Delta Chronicles are available now on Steam, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and Nintendo Switch 2. Check out the link in the description, use promo code LORE, and let me know in the comments, if you could turn any Voyager episode into a what-if scenario, which would you choose? Supporting my sponsors keeps the channel on the air. Let's get back into it. To understand what Q did in 2365, look past what the official record says happened and pay attention to the one person on that ship who understood it in real time. Picard is confident, almost defiantly so. He tells Q that Starfleet is out here precisely because it's ready for the unknown. That readiness is the entire point of the mission. Q doesn't argue the point. He ends it. A snap of the fingers, and the Enterprise is 7,000 light-years from where it was a moment ago, in System J-25, face-to-face with a cube full of the Borg Collective. That's the official story. An arrogant captain, a humbling lesson, a warning about the size of the galaxy. Except there's a passenger on that ship who reacts differently from everyone else. Guinan doesn't need a briefing. She recognizes the threat instantly, because a century earlier this exact species tore through her people, scattered the survivors across the galaxy, and left a civilization in pieces. She isn't surprised by the Borg. She's the only one on that bridge who isn't. And watch her when Q appears, because that detail matters just as much. These two know each other. There's history in that room, old history, and none of it is warm. She warns Picard about him in the same breath she'd warn him about a weapon. Put those two facts side by side. Q didn't fling the Enterprise at some undiscovered menace. He flung it at the very species that destroyed the people of the one woman aboard who has a past with him. If this were really a lesson about the size of the unknown, he chose a strange classroom. Not somewhere genuinely unmapped, but the site of somebody else's massacre, replayed in front of the sole witness guaranteed to recognize the pattern on sight. Which raises the question the rest of this file is built on. If Q already knew what the Borg were, what they'd done, and who on that ship would know it too, then what was the lesson actually for? Humanity hadn't done anything yet to earn a warning that specific. The only party in that room with unfinished business was Q. Q had the entire galaxy to work with. Older empires, harder powers, civilizations that had been fighting the Borg, or losing to them, for centuries before Starfleet ever cleared its own solar system. He went to none of them. He kept coming back to one bridge, one captain, one species barely out of its infancy. The selectivity is the tell. Humanity was useful precisely because it was unfinished. Every other major power already had a fixed relationship with the collective. Institutional memory, inherited doctrine, hardened assumptions. Starfleet had none of it, and therefore nothing Q would need to dismantle first. A blank instrument is easier to aim than one that already has opinions about the target. Then there's what Starfleet believes about itself. This is a fleet built on the conviction that any problem yields to exploration, diplomacy, or patience, an institution that treats combat as a last resort rather than a first language. A culture like that doesn't walk toward the Borg voluntarily. It has to be shoved. So Q doesn't ask Starfleet to prepare. He removes the choice and lets the consequences do the recruiting. And mind the timing. He doesn't wait for humanity to be ready. He picks the exact moment it isn't. 2365. An era of confidence curdling into complacency. Years or decades before Starfleet's own trajectory would have met the collective naturally. If the goal were protection, that timing is malpractice. If the goal is manufacturing an adversary on a schedule you control, it's craftsmanship. Strength had nothing to do with it. Starfleet was chosen for being moldable, uncommitted, and easy to point somewhere it would never have walked on its own. None of this makes sense without going back further than 2365, to a war most of the galaxy never knew happened. We can't subpoena the continuum, so we'll build this the honest way, from what's on the record, and tell you exactly where the record ends and the inference begins. On the record, the Elorians were never soldiers, they were listeners. A people whose perception ran deeper than events. When history itself was cut and restitched around her, Guinan felt the seam. She stood on a ship where every officer, every instrument, every log insisted the timeline was normal, and she alone knew it was wrong. Call it what it functioned as, a sense. And a species carrying that sense is the one kind of witness a reality editing being can't out-argue, because you can't gaslight someone who can fill where the cut was made. Also on the record, Q and Guinan have a past, and it's hostile. And her civilization, that inconveniently perceptive civilization, was gutted a century before the Federation ever met the Borg, by the Borg, and its survivors scattered to the winds. Now the inference, of every species in the galaxy the collective could have consumed, the one that happened to be erased as a functioning civilization was the species equipped to catch a Q in the act. And the instrument of that erasure was the single force in the galaxy immune to everything that made the Elorians formidable. You can't listen your way past the Borg. You can't feel the seam of a timeline at a collective that doesn't care about causality and can't be reasoned with, because it isn't listening. As a murder weapon, the Borg aren't just effective against a species of listeners. They're bespoke. We're not claiming Q built the collective. The record won't carry that, and we won't pretend it does. What the record carries is worse in its own way. A being with a hostile history against exactly one species that could expose him, and that species destroyed, in his lifetime, by the one enemy purpose fit to destroy them, while he watched and said nothing. Aiming a weapon you found isn't more innocent than building one. It's just easier to deny. And weapons built to be unreasonable don't stay pointed where you left them. Line up 3 pieces of the record. First, Q's demeanor in 2365 reads as urgency wearing a smirk, not the calm of a teacher delivering a lesson. He needles Picard that he's judging himself against the pitiful adversaries he's met so far, and underneath the theater the tone is unmistakable. This is someone reacting to a thing that's already gotten away from him. Second, the Borg incursion at Earth in 2063 didn't stay contained to that battle, or even to its own century. Drones died on the surface. Wreckage went into the Arctic ice and stayed there. Nearly 100 years later, a human research team dug it out. The drones woke up, and the crew of Archer's Enterprise had to run down an assimilated transport before it could phone home. That's a documented Borg presence on Earth, decades before first contact was ever supposed to happen. If anyone still had a leash on this weapon, that's an extraordinary thing to leave lying around. Assets under control don't get discovered by accident, by people who weren't even looking. Third, by the time Voyager reaches the Delta Quadrant, the Borg are no longer a regional threat but a transwarp network spanning the galaxy. Dozens of cubes hidden inside a single nebula, infrastructure on a scale no one being was tracking, let alone managing. Something that size doesn't stay quietly monitored by whoever first found it useful. It stays ahead of him. No single exhibit proves control was lost, and we won't oversell any one of them. Together they trace the shape of exactly that. A weapon precise enough to erase one witness, and self-sustaining enough to keep working long after the job was done, in places its user never authorized, and possibly never even saw. By 2365, whatever grip Q once had was already slipping. And containment, not confidence, is what every appearance afterward actually looks like. If 2365 were an isolated incident, this file would end here. One reckless intervention, regrettable, explainable. It isn't isolated, it's the first move in a sequence that recurs for decades, and every recurrence carries the same fingerprints. Wolf 359 happens because Starfleet, forced into contact years early, has had no time to build the doctrine, the ships, or the tactics to survive the collective on its own terms. 39 ships are gone almost before Starfleet understands what it's fighting. Benjamin Sisko survives it, and the officer who walks out of Wolf 359 isn't the one who walked in. He loses his wife in that battle. He ends up reassigned to a forgotten station on the edge of Federation space, and while he's there, not even looking for it, he finds a stable wormhole to the Gamma Quadrant. That discovery is what puts the Federation in the Dominion's path, and the war that follows becomes the costliest in Starfleet's history. Trace the chain backward, and every link touches the same starting point. No Wolf 359, no Shattered Sisko. No Shattered Sisko, no particular reason that officer lands on that station. No officer on that station, no wormhole found on that timetable, and no early collision with the Dominion on it either. We're not claiming Q planned the Dominion War. The Dominos don't need him to. He only had to place the first one close enough to the rest. Then, a decade on, the pattern surfaces again. Cleaner. Q hands a stranded Janeway a shortened, incomplete route home, and he's careful to explain that finishing the journey is their job, not his. Within a year of that gift, Voyager is at the threshold of a nebula concealing one of the Collective's transwarp hubs, and when the crew leaves, the hub is rubble. Canon never draws the line between the gift and the hub, so we won't either. We'll just note the arithmetic. The shortcut put that ship, that much sooner, into the exact stretch of space where the Collective's most valuable asset happened to be sitting. And the being who provided it has a documented habit of incomplete favors with expensive endings. Q never lifted a hand. He never has to. 2 Starfleet crews, 3 decades apart, both delivered into direct confrontation with the Collective years ahead of any natural schedule. And in both cases, the hand doing the delivering belongs to Q, the one carrying the oldest grudge against the thing they were sent to fight. Call it what it looks like. A doctrine. Not a single decision, not a single trick, but a method. Locate the pressure point. Withhold the full picture. Force the choice. Let consequence do the work he isn't willing to do himself. Run the method against the record and the lesson framing collapses. A lesson ends. This doesn't. It resurfaces in 2365, at Wolf 359, at a transwarp hub on the far side of the galaxy. 3 decades, 3 captains, the same technique every time. Minimum information, maximum leverage, someone else doing the dying. That's not a teacher revisiting a lesson plan. That's an operator returning to a tool that keeps working. And it recasts Q's entire fixation with humanity. He put this species on trial at the very first meeting, and he's never once closed the docket. He keeps returning, keeps testing whether the Federation holds its principles under pressure. Seen from inside that trial, the Borg campaign stops being a separate story, running alongside it, and becomes a working demonstration inside it. Every time Q points Starfleet at the Collective, he's watching, again, whether this species will do the violence he needs done and still call itself the same thing afterward. Whether that makes his use of Starfleet cruelty, convenience, or something closer to necessity depends on what he's actually testing for. And no honest reading of the record can close that question yet. What it can close is this. Strip everything down and the Borg stop being the mystery at all. They're the weapon. Found, aimed, lost, and quietly outsourced ever since to a species that thinks it keeps meeting them by accident. Which makes humanity the second weapon. And the second weapon still doesn't know whose holster it lives in. So the next time the record shows Q on a Starfleet bridge, don't ask what he wants. Ask what he needs cleaned up and who he's planning to spend to do it. Because a being who tests a species for 30 years isn't idly curious about the answer. He's waiting on a verdict. And the disturbing part isn't that the trial is still open. It's that Q already knows how it ends. He's seen the final day of the Federation, and he made sure Starfleet saw it too. And if you're interested, that file is already open on this channel.